Hello, another update on that little game I'm doing. I've made a few changes since the last video. In the last video, what was I doing? I was, yeah, the beacons. Alright, so, done the beacons. I've now done some work on moving doors and switches and commander characters. So let's just start playing. So there's a few new things here. This is a switch. It's just a bit of a mesh that controls the doors. You activate it, it activates the door and closes, and so on. Nothing too exciting there. I will of course make a slightly more exciting door at some point. This is just a different version of the same thing. Yeah, so what I've done some work on, let's just open that and get the other side, is the, that's fine, that's where I want to be, the concept of commanders. So, go! This sort of, well, orangey fella, not intended to be any sort of racial stereotyping, just trying to visually distinguish. So these can spawn in various ways with the normal survivors. You can set it to spawn first, last, or somewhere in the middle randomly. And these have the ability to follow your instructions in a limited way. They can operate switches. So I will return to this view. You can, near a switch, put down this order thing, and you see there's a little animation there. Now, when you put that down, the commanders will reasonably intelligently match the orders. So if one is within range, reachable, the commander who can get there will get there by and large. So if I put one here, that commander, there's a debug line there. It wants to get there, but he can't. And if I was to, for example, do that, if I was to get rid of that command, they would then switch around, so the one who can reach it will. That's just by using properties of paths, the path cost, and checking whether there's a partial path, which means the path is blocked. So I do my own little cost function where every so often certain events will cause the commanders to update the orders they are responding to, and each time it does it, it works out paths. So it's a little bit expensive, and everyone's standing around because I built a door there. But they reevaluate where they want to go when the nav mesh changes. So things that block the nav mesh, when they change, that triggers a reevaluation of where the commanders go. So let me just... Okay, so that one, this isn't quite perfect. Because that one can go to either set or stay with the one where the place it is at the moment. But if I first of all give him something to do, and then send him back. So what is all this in aid of, you might ask, reasonably. The thing is, if you've got a commander standing by a switch that you have instructed them to stand by, and they will stand there until you tell them to stop, you can activate the switch without being there. So they are doing it on your behalf, and there will be an animation where they reach out to it and tap on the keyboard or whatever, or perhaps something a little less accurate, which opens up new kinds of puzzles that you can do. And when you've done it, they're free to go. The commanders will by default slightly more efficiently head to the exit. I'm going to... Yeah, all these people are milling around now, but I will get out of the way. Just put some beacons down. So they're all following them before they're ready, but if I lazily make that an order and say, open the door please, they should now, let's get the remaining people through. Everyone should now, with some minor exceptions, go... Oh, sorry guys. And of course the commanders themselves will want to get out. And eventually it all shakes out of the behaviour tree, which I've modified. I've got a separate behaviour tree and blackboard now for the commanders, which is based on the original blackboard thing there. So there you go, that was a slightly slow run. So if these switches here are broken and inaccessible to your character, you can get the survivors to open the doors themselves. And with these doors you can then get a bit of flow control. I may create a few other things that will, for example, attract the survivors in various ways or repel them even. And that should give a bit of scope for doing puzzles. So that's the basic stuff I've done. And in doing all those things I've done little subtasks. So you can see there, that's a particle system. Well, that's disappointing. I seem to have muted my microphone, so here is me after the event trying to figure out what the hell I was talking about. Particles, the things, the default particles. Yeah, look at it go. Woo. Have some music. I think it's just easiest if I give you some music. I'll cut in when I need to. Spawns this. Let me find that you place to create the order. A lot of horrible things in here, but let's see if I can just find a particle. That looks about right. So if okay, so what it does is it finds the position of... Okay, that's actually an arrow. So there's an arrow in each of the switch configurations, which happens to be centralized on the screen, so I'm using that as a destination point. I have to make it a relative offset, so I subtract the location of the order, which is that sort of corporal mark. So that is a relative offset, which is then plugged into the particle system with the target location parameter. So if the switch is 100 Y unit, that'll be a vector of 0, 100, 0, and it'll be plugged into the particle stream to make them go in a different direction. And that just has the effect of making that link appear. So when you hover over there, didn't really work well. I could have changed that. It's hard to select it because you can't actually select, you can't hover over decal. It doesn't work with a trace, so I had to put something physical there which doesn't affect navigation. And you see that spinning light, that's from another project of mine. I just have it, and it's slightly complicated. It's a sort of fairly general case. With the switches I have it so that you can have multiple actors controlled, and you can also have the linked switches, which so you'll see when you activate one switch, the other one changes as well to keep that in sync. That's manually specified. You could perhaps just, you know, do something to find reciprocal switches based on what they're controlling, but that's not how I've done it. I've done it the easy manual way. I've got a little light that highlights the ground red or green just to give you a visual cue. One downside is it's quite hard to activate these top down, but actually it's not as hard as I thought. You can fairly reasonably hover on there to get the switch. And every time the door finishes its course, it changes where the commanders go. So there's another commander. By default, they'll run to the exit. Let's make that easy for them. And there you go. You're free to go. And I can open that myself. And then you can have them all going through. I've also added, let me just go back. I've added a few more destinations that they can go to. This makes it a bit less efficient for them running around, but that's the intention, that if you're not guided. I'm going to cry. I just did a quarter of an hour with my microphone muted. FML. Let me try and remember what I did and do it more succinctly and interestingly. Field of view. I'm going to go over this a bit quicker because that's boring now. When you play, this view fits the screen width-wise in this sort of square format. If you go full screen play, it now fits it with the sort of the vertical fit, and I've got a function that does that automatically. In a nutshell, your camera looking down looks at the game area. Field of view theta, hard to find details, but actually rather than being corner to corner, it's a horizontal field of view. And the way I do it, I get the extent of a plane underlying the play area. So let me just stop, go back. Camera target plane. I've just got this hidden in-game plane, nothing flash, just a plane. That just defines where the camera is going to fit things in. So the camera will guarantee to get that plane in view and as little else as possible, so it's as zoomed in as possible. So I've got a function that gets the extent of that, which is actually just the half extent in each direction. So given that, that's actually W, because that's the width I'm working with. This is kind of arbitrary, but here we go. This makes it all work. So half theta there, you divide it into right angle triangles, which means that tan of half theta equals W over H, which means you can then inverse that to get the field of view theta, which is 2 times inverse tan of W over H. You may need to fiddle with factors of 2, but that basically will give you the field of view that you want for a given height fitting in a given plane. Now, I say W is width, it could be the height, because it turns out that the top-down template has the axes not the way you expect them, or not the way I expect them, but Y and X are not necessarily the way you expect them to be, so check you've got them the right way around. Field of view, done. What's next? The materials and the switches I was going to look at, and this one, just one simple trick, which is that the material underlying this is here. It merges this texture, computery stuff, with this texture, and it uses that as a mask to mask out a black bit to fit that in, but it doesn't tile over everything. And bit of a hack, but basically you go to the texture, add in the texture. I've changed the tiling method from wrap to clamp. Never had any reason to do that before, but it means that you can just, without having to get a really hacky, difficult material, just have that happen. And it's dynamic, so that if you use the switch, it changes the texture in the middle. and that needs a bit of work. So first of all, in the construction script, you have to create a dynamic material instance. So element 1 is the index for the screen material. I'm basically replacing it with itself. I'm not changing the material, but I'm saying make it dynamic material and storing that as screen material. And then when I update the screen, I select on whether it's currently activated either an off or on texture for that tick or cross, and then set it in the parameter name tick or cross. And when we go back to the here, you see this is a parameter 2D, a parameter texture parameter 2D blah, blah, called tick or cross. So it's simple to do when you know what to do where, but you can spend ages trying to figure out, well, why is nothing happening because you forgot to make a dynamic material instance and so on. So those 2 steps are necessary: set the parameter, but also set up the dynamic material instance. And as a third step, make it a clamped texture so you can more easily inlay one texture into another in that special case. One other material I was going to look at, my flashing material. I've ballsed up something. I can't think what it is, but maybe, I don't know. So what it does, it should be pulsing. Or maybe I fixed it now. I'm going to let that save. Let's see what happens. Well, that's more of a proper pulse. So all it's doing is taking time, and you can do things I haven't done. I've multiplied it down to make it a slower flash. You can tweak these a bit. Maybe rounded is better. I multiply it by a tint to give it that colour, and then I massively multiply it by 15 or whatever to create an emissive colour that's much bigger than 1, which means you start to get sort of glowing effects. So don't be afraid with your emissive stuff to make it super ramped up. And that's those materials, really. I think that was all I was going to cover, so I'll keep it shorter and sweeter. Thank you for listening.